She sits silently with her wrinkled hands folded over her lap as she's wheeled outside into the park. Feeling the strength of the wind on her back, she wraps the shawl around her shoulders tighter, lifting herself onto the wooden bench. Sometimes she likes to take off her shoes and stretch her toes, staring at the feet that once were the reason for her fame. The heel was still thick and tender to the touch, and the toes overlapped one another. He watched her slim fingers grasp the handle of the chinaware as the candle flickered. On the cold nights, she would light an extra one, as though the fire behind them did not exist and light itself would be enough to keep them warm. Even when he closed his eyes, urging his mind to wander, his ears would perk up to listen to her familiar footsteps. His nose would flare to the perfume he knew all too well. He would open his eyes and find her kneeling across from him, black eyes looking into his blue ones. They did not talk, but rather sat in silence, lost in their own thoughts. Sometimes he would ask her to dance for him, and he sat and watched as her tiny feet moved to the beat of the drum. The same fingers grasped the handle of the fan with strength, and he imagined that the breeze against her face felt the same as his breath on her neck. I remember the first time I slept through the night without a terrible dream. It was the night that he had shown up. I suppose he'd surprised me from the very beginning. His eyes were like water. The stillness in them could easily be mistaken for the hardness of ice. He introduced himself to Chio-san as Keswick, and he wore the muddy green uniform of the troops that had marched for me in my country months ago. For what incomprehensible reason did he still wear his tattered uniform? If he hoped to get the services of any of my sisters here, he would not have worn the uniform of the offender. We were only 60 miles north of the larger explosion, and I remember we were close enough for me to see its deceptively soft shape in the sky. Chio-san had looked at me expectantly then, knowing I was the only one who she would not have to threaten to service him. But I was bitter. Even after 2 years, Chio-san and my sister saw me as different from them. They felt no empathy for the way their men had seized me from my country and brought me here to service them. I walked to the room that he had been given, and I slid open the screen door abruptly. He looked up at me then. But in his eyes, I saw no contempt, no mockery, and I felt the heat in my veins smolder before he ignited it again. I don't remember the rest of the night, except for the way his thumb drew a circle on my shoulder as he began to slide off my kimono. She smiles now as she remembers the day after the war had ended. She remembers how her first impulse was to throw off her kimono and change back into her collared dress, and how she could buy a plane ticket right back to Shanghai. But she never brought herself to do it. She watches a petal fall from the tree above her, and the cherry blossom lands, forcing a ripple in the pond. She's waited all day for a fish or a turtle to look up from under the water. She's been looking for a disturbance from beneath, but the waters have remained calm all day. He knew he was asking to be shot, or at least to be brutally beaten. He pretended not to notice the resentful gazes that followed him as he walked down the streets, as if he wasn't the prey that was waiting to be devoured. She was the only one who had not treated him with disdain, and he went back night after night. That was how it was for many weeks, perhaps months. But that was before she had disappeared. He had lost track of time since he had been released upon the victory of the Allies. He had half expected them to kill him. The scars on his back and arms lay dormant, past and serene, but the pain had been real. His body had become a slave to his weary mind, and his vision began to get hazy from the lack of food. He imagined her walking with him, the curve of her neck and the pale, flawless skin. He had come to smile at the sternness of her face and the curt bow she gave him as a greeting, but he had grown to love the woman he got a glimpse of once the sun had fallen. He had trouble walking in a straight line from the lightheadedness that had begun to take over until he felt a small hand stealing him. He almost didn't recognize her with her hair pulled taut, face powdered heavily with patent rouge lips. He allowed her to take him inside and put him to sleep on the tatami. For the first time since we met months ago, we had a conversation. He was surprised to learn that I was educated and that I could carry a decent conversation with him in his native English. "The war is over," he said. "Why are you still living here?" I can earn a steady living here as a geisha now, I replied. As if he knew I was lying, he eased himself into a comfortable position as if preparing for the truth. I can't go back. I'm practically Japanese now. They won't have me either. He thumbed the ghost scar that trailed up his forearm. They see me like this, and they'll treat the ones in the internment camps out by the west coast even worse, even after we bombed the shits out of here already. I had the urge to hold him then, and I wrapped my arms around his unmoving body. I traced the scars along his forearms and felt them fan out like riblets onto his back. It must have been the steel rod. They used it once on me when I first arrived, reserved for prisoners of war. He stilled my movement and he grabbed my feet and unbound them. He held the small ankles and frowned when he saw me wince from the pain of moving my feet freely for the first time. In the morning, he would wake and tell me, "My scars didn't ache for the first time last night." And I would reply, "Last night was the first time I slept with my feet freely, unbound." She finishes stretching her toes and puts her socks and shoes back on. She still has the flower petal in her hand as she eases back into the wheelchair and asks to be wheeled towards the base of the tree. She feels the grooves in the bark, reminded of the veins and the scars that pulsed together so long ago. She places the flower on the mound at the base of the tree before asking to be wheeled back again into her home. Thank you.